And now, from Louisville, Kentucky, the horse capital of the world and sports junkies' finest, giving you wagering advice and sports analysis. It's On the Switch with your host, Gino G.
Welcome back, everybody, to On the Switch podcast. I'm Gino G. I'm your boy, holding it down. Wednesday, May the 16th. I hope everybody had a great Mother's Day weekend. I did myself. I'm sorry we weren't able to throw a couple podcasts together. Insanely busy, but I hope everybody had a great weekend. We are here today to cover quite a few topics here. A couple really important things, including a ban that now allows gambling as long as the states okay it. We'll get into that a little bit. Also, Game 1, Game 2, Cavs and Celtics, we'll go over those. We'll also touch base with Game 1, Golden State and Houston. We'll talk a little bit about Webb Simpson, how he took down the Players' Championship at TPC Sawgrass. We'll also talk about the enormous week that we have coming up here on the podcast. Going to be throwing together, including tonight, 7 podcasts, possibly 6, depending on how things go. But we're really excited. It's Preakness week. Preakness being on Saturday at Pimlico. Black Eyed Susan on Friday. We'll have those two along with Churchill Downs Racing on Thursday. That starts at 5 p.m. Churchill Downs Racing on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as well. So let's just get right into it here, and we'll talk about this whole gambling ban. It was lifted by the government, 6-3 vote, saying now it's up to the states whether or not they want or will allow sports wagering. What an enormous thing. Just in general, you're talking about, I think back in the early 2000s, whatnot, you're talking about a $200 billion business. $200 billion. Now, when you can only bet in Vegas, quote unquote, legally, how much of that money is going to Joe Blow down in Costa Rica, right? Wherever Bovada is located, whether it's South America or wherever, it's just unreal the amount of money that is not placed, wagered, and taxed by the United States of America. I just think this is going to be such an instrumental thing when it comes to sports just in general, the amount of money that goes into it, possibly maybe getting into NCAA paying players maybe at some point now with all this wagering going on amateur athletics. Also, in general, horse racing, which we cover, I think everything can bloat and be huge when it comes to the amount of money that's going to be placed in sports wagering. I do have to say, looking over a map that was posted on Twitter, I'm sorry I can't remember who actually posted it, but looks like some states have already passed it, including New Jersey, who has been asking for this for many, many, many years. Indiana tried passing it immediately and immediately got denied, along with the state of Kentucky in which I live. So unfortunately, those two states are maybe kind of having a problem, so they won't be able to integrate that into Churchill Downs, local casinos in Indiana, like Horseshoe in southern Indiana. These places won't be able to take sports wagers quite yet, but I believe overall this is going to be something that will pass pretty much unanimously across the country. So I really believe that this podcast will be making a turn once horse racing ends in November, culminating with Breeders' Cup. Then once November kind of ends, Breeders' Cup ends, we have college football, college basketball, NFL. So when it comes to the podcast, we'll be looking at starting horse racing with the end of college basketball in March, April, doing horse racing all the way through Breeders' Cup, which is November, which then will start to get into college football, NFL, college basketball, like I said, and then culminating at the very end with college basketball, March Madness, and then rinse and repeat over and over. We'll talk about selections from college basketball, selections from the NFL, college football, parlays maybe, just anything and everything that we can possibly get our hands on now that everything is pretty much legal. We're going to get New Jersey, hopefully, like I said, Indiana, Kentucky, all to pass this to where we can now touch base with a lot of people with multiple selections, try to make the absolute most money possible. So pretty excited about that. Next thing on the podcast, next thing that we need to touch base with, how about Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Boston Celtics. A lot of people that I've talked to, whether it was at work or just friends in general, people say without Kyrie Irving, without Gordon Hayward, LeBron is just going to basically own this entire series. And let's be real. Talking about game one, 108-83 loss, for the Cavaliers at least. The Celtics win 108-83. LeBron had 15 points and 7 assists on 5 of 16 shooting. 5 of 16 shooting. Marcus Morris said before this series even started, besides Kawhi Leonard, I'm the person that needs to guard LeBron James. And I'll be the first one to tell you. I'll raise my hand to God. No way, bro. No way. There is no chance you are the guy to guard LeBron James. Not happening. Okay? But let me tell you, he absolutely shut him down in game one. As I said, 5 of 16 shooting for 15 points and 7 assists in a 108-83 loss. That's LeBron. The leading scorer for the Cavaliers that game was Kevin Love with 17. When it comes to this series, as far as looking at it from an outside perspective, it's going to be all about the bench. The bench, the role players, J.R. Smith, Kyle Korver, even Larry Nance. Those kind of guys have to step up and score, have huge games for them to be successful. And it just didn't happen in game one. Marcus Morris, as we said, who did a fantastic job guarding LeBron James, had 21 points and 10 rebounds as well in 34 minutes. I was so surprised with how Boston just handled Cleveland on the defensive end. Absolutely just dominated this game. Now, when it comes to game two, which was just last night, 107-94 win by Boston. And if really you didn't watch the game, you have no idea how this happened. No, you just look and you're like, oh, Boston won by 13. Big whoop. Let me tell you, LeBron James had 21 points in the first quarter. Not the first half. Not the game. The first quarter. The first quarter, LeBron James had 21. He only had 15 in game one. He has 21 in the first quarter. And you saw it in his eyes. I'm going to take over this series. And after the end of the first quarter, as the Cavaliers were up 6, I said, hey, LeBron is serious tonight. He is serious. Well, the rest of the game, he only had 21 points, so he had 42 overall. He added 12 assists and 10 rebounds for his second triple-double of the playoffs, but pretty much after the first quarter, non-existent. He did have 21 in the other 3 quarters, so, take that with a grain of salt. But once Marcus Morris kind of sat down, had a conversation with Brad Stevens, he got taken out in the middle of the third quarter. He kind of sat down next to Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens kind of gave him a little maybe jump start or pep talk, whatever you want to say. He came in the middle of the third quarter and sparked with Marcus Smart a run, completely eliminating LeBron James from the game. And that was really in the middle of the third quarter when they took the lead. The game was over at that point. Once Boston had the lead, they were never going to relinquish it. Ended up, as I said, as the winners by 13 points. Now, also, I want everybody to understand that when it comes to the Eastern Conference, I don't believe either one of these teams can compare to the teams on the other side. Talking about Golden State and Houston. So let's go ahead and move over to the Western Conference Finals. Golden State and Houston played 2 nights ago at Houston. It was a 119-106 Golden State W, led by Kevin Durant, who had 37 points. And I'll be honest with you, what he was able to do, especially from the mid-range, he is possibly growing into the best mid-range player ever of all time. He's one of the purest shooters at 6'11" that anybody's ever seen, right? Linky. You go out there, he looks like he has Twizzlers for arms and legs. The guy's arms and legs are just the size of my pinky. He goes out there and just lights them up. Gets into the lane or gets at the elbow, and when he rises and fires, it's impossible to stop. He had 37 points in the W. Klay Thompson added 28. Steph Curry had 18, 8 assists and 6 rebounds. Basically, almost a triple-double for him. Now, on the other side, Chris Paul had 23 points and 11 assists, which I think if Houston's going to have success, he's going to have these games all the time. James Harden scored 41 points on 14 of 24 shooting. Now, if you're a Houston fan or if you're backing Houston, if James Harden had 41 points on 14 of 24 shooting, and Chris Paul had 23 points and 11 rebounds. Take into consideration that Eric Gordon also shot the ball well, 6 of 13 for 15 points. How do you win? How do you win? You did everything you possibly could on the offensive end of the floor, still only scored 106 points. And you got 41 from Harden, 23 from Chris Paul, 15 added from Eric Gordon. Houston could be in deep trouble. What I really love about this Western Conference Finals is the fact that Golden State pretty much came in as, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but almost overlooked. Although they're NBA champions from last year, this team really has kind of walked into this position, not been that impressive, I guess you could say. And as Houston on the other end has pretty much been the team the entire NBA season, they come in and Golden State's like, look, we've been here before, okay? We know how to win Western Conference Finals. We know how to win NBA championships. Let me just show you how this goes. And in a 119-106 win, Golden State really did a great job defensively. I know, like I said, when it comes to offensively, I thought Houston did a good job. At the same side of the coin, when it came down to it and Golden State needs stops, they got stops. That's how it was. So defensively, they did plenty. They did enough. They rebounded the ball fantastically. And most importantly, Houston had only 3 fast break points. 3. They averaged over 21 on the season. They had 3 game 1. Huge difference in the game. Houston is known for getting out in transition, open threes, just tossing the ball. I mean, just up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. This game, more half court. They were still efficient, but without those open threes, getting more looks, they really struggled. So Golden State, if they can keep the fast break points down for Houston, they're going to have a lot of success like they did in game 1. So when it comes to game 2, I really don't believe that Houston's going to lose 2 at home. They were the best team in the NBA at home. I just don't see them losing 2 games at home. But I will tell you this. If perhaps they lose game 2 tomorrow, or talking about tonight, they lose game 2, they are in not only a world of hurt, but they're having to look towards next season because there's no way they're coming out of an 0-2 hole. No way. So, key to the game tonight, can Golden State stop them again in transition? While also, can Houston find a way to actually stop them? Now, you're talking about possibly one of the greatest starting fives of all time in Golden State. You're talking about KD, Steph, Clay, whether you want Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, just go down the list, like whatever starting 5 you want to put out there. It's possibly one of the best starting 5s of all time. How can you get enough stops and still be offensively efficient to get the job done? That's going to be the key tonight. Although I like Golden State for the series, like I said, I don't think Houston's going to lose 2 games at home. I will take Houston, give up the points. Currently, I don't know what the spread is. I know game 1 spread was -2.5 for Houston. Looking right now, it looks like Houston's -1.5. I would take the I would give the 1.5 to Golden State, knowing that if Houston has any chance whatsoever, they have to win tonight. So Houston -1.5. Gino G's pick of the day as far as the NBA. Now, as mentioned before, Webb Simpson wins the Players' Championship. Webb Simpson, here's what's interesting about him. 2011 won the U.S. Open, right? He had 3 wins that season. 2012 he wins. 2013 he wins. Since 2013, ghost town. Absolute ghost town. Had a couple of small little surgeries, had a couple of swing changes, and now, like, you watch him swing, it's almost brutal to even watch him swing. I mean, it's remarkable that he hits so many good shots, and especially this week, he hits so many fantastic shots. Just the way his swing is, it's just like, I don't get it. I don't get it. But Webb Simpson does take down the Players' Championship in $1.98 million. He shot a total of 270 or -18. He was 4 shots clear over Charles Schwartzel, Xander Schauffele, and Jimmy Walker. So what I find interesting about this Players' Championship is when it comes to the U.S. Open at Shinnecock, I feel like TPC Sawgrass and Shinnecock are kind of relatable. They're shorter courses, but tough. They really can make a fool out of you, or you can really capitalize and shoot low scores like Webb Simpson did. So I think the players who played well this week really are looking good as far as being primed to show up at the U.S. Open and play well as well. Now, I know U.S. Opens are a little bit different. If you're off the fairway, the rough is literally shin high, knee high. On top of that, typically the greens are much faster. I know even Tiger Woods had mentioned during TPC, or during the Players, that TPC, it was so humid that the greens were actually somewhat soft because it was so humid outside. Now, this is probably not going to be how it is at Shinnecock. It's probably going to be dry. It's probably going to be putting like you're putting on concrete. So I would tend to say that this past week with Webb Simpson winning the Players was a little bit easier than what it's going to be, obviously, at the U.S. Open. There's no chance that the winner at the U.S. Open is going to shoot minus 18. So, but I do think as far as the courses, hole to hole, par 3s, par 5s, par 4s, I think there is a lot of comparison between the two. So taking a look at some of the other players that played well, finishing in the top 10, like I said, we said Churchill, which I tend to like. Jimmy Walker is an interesting one who finished tied for second. He just seems to always be lurking somewhere. Never really wins, but always seems to finish top 5, top 10, something like that. So I think that's an interesting possible foreshadowing as far as a selection for the U.S. Open. Maybe he just breaks through there. But also notable top 10 players, Jason Day. He's hit and miss for me. The fact that he is now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, 191 for 191 putting inside 5 feet, which is he's the only person on tour that's 100%. His scrambling is obviously at the top because he's putting it within inside 5 feet and he's making them all. So I think he's a guy as far as scrambling wise, and when he strikes the ball well with his putter, he's going to be extremely tough. Jason Duffner, who I'm not a big fan of, but did finish top 10 here, so we had to take note of that. Keegan Bradley, another player who's trying to find himself a little bit, has had some success over the last 5 years or so. A guy that I'll probably playing against or won't have any bets on or anything like that when it comes to the U.S. Open. Harold Varner. Harold Varner is another guy a young guy that I think can really maybe make a statement when it comes to the U.S. Open. Take note of that. Tommy Fleetwood, the Brit or the Englishman, who I think I just love. First of all, he has probably the greatest hair in golf, for one. Number two, he hits it so far, so pure, and putts well. I mean, it's just impossible to leave him off a ticket when it comes to the U.S. Open. And then Danny Lee. Danny Lee's a consistent player. Again, another player who struggles to actually win, but always seems to be there. Now, just outside of the top 10, and speaking of tied for 11th, so just right outside the top 10, I have to mention, just because I'm a lover, a fanatic, whatever you want to say, Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods. Now, let me just tell you all guys a couple of things. Tiger Woods, for one, barely made the cut. He was actually had his plane ready because he thought he was for sure, he didn't think there was any way he was going to make the cut for the weekend. All of a sudden, he makes the cut. He shoots low score on Saturday, had it to, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, -7 at one point on Sunday. He was 4 shots back. I mean, you're looking and you're saying, oh my gosh, this could be the greatest comeback in history. All of a sudden, makes a couple of bogeys on the way in, makes a couple of mistakes, finishes at a total of -11, finishes T11. But I think the fact that he grinded so hard, played so well on the weekend while he didn't play well Thursday and Friday, I think he's just getting better every single week. Every single time he's out there, every single time he's competing, he's just getting better and better and better. And of course, as everybody knows, you're either on one side or the other. I love Tiger Woods. So anytime I can see Tiger Woods in contention, I'm the happiest man in the world. So I believe, in my opinion, just the way he played the weekend, I think he has a monster chance in the U.S. Open at Shinnecock. So let's keep note of that as well. Otherwise, a pretty, I would say, boring in a way. I don't mean that in a bad way to Webb Simpson, but a boring weekend just because he was so far ahead. He played so well the first 2 days, then shoots -4 on Saturday. Pretty much shut everybody out. So congratulations to Webb Simpson and the $1.98 million that he won. And really to end the podcast here, I want to go over a few things. As we said, when it comes to sports gambling, now that it's been lifted, I want to ensure everybody that we're still going to be pumping out content. Once horse racing is pretty much over, quote unquote, when it comes to Breeders' Cup, we're going to move right in, while even during and probably before Breeders' Cup, we'll be diving into college football. We'll dive in a little bit. I'm not a monster fan of the NFL, but we'll dive in a little bit to the NFL. We'll talk big-time college basketball. Big-time college basketball in the winter. Also, a few things for everybody to look forward to. Well, when it comes to the Belmont Stakes, which from this weekend will be 3 weekends, we'll have Frankie, a guy that I've met on Twitter. We'll have him on the podcast for the breakdown of Belmont Stakes Day. Also, he will be on the podcast in the future for the Whitney and the Traverse from Saratoga. Also, when it comes to the U.S. Open golf, I'm going to have one of my best friends, Donnie Payne, on the podcast as well. Really excited about those two things. Excited to work with those two guys who are extremely knowledgeable at their respective things, whether it's golf or it's horse racing, and I really expect their opinion both. So I want everybody to know with the podcast, we're doing big things. We're going to be constantly pumping out content. Like I said, this week, 7 podcasts. Perhaps only 6, depending on how things work out, but possibly up to 7 podcasts this week. Please check us out. If you haven't already, drop us a follow on Twitter at OnTheSwitch1. You can drop myself a follow at DavilleKY32. That's DAVILLEKY32. We also have a guy on the back end who doesn't get any credit, but should get it all because he's the one that puts it all together. You can also drop him a follow at Travis, the number 2L, Travis 2L. Also, if you haven't already, go to iTunes, subscribe to us. We're working on getting on iHeartRadio, Spotify. We're on SoundCloud, Google Play. Please subscribe to us. Any questions, concerns, whatever you have, you can send me a personal email at gfgrieshaber. That's GRIESHAB as in boy, ER at Gmail. Or you can actually send us a email on the Switch Show at gmail.com as well. I hope to hear from you all. I hope to hear some suggestions. We're willing to do anything that you all want to hear. Any questions, concerns, whatnot, will always be here on the Switch Podcast. I'm Gino G. Listen for us coming back tomorrow, talking about Thursday Churchill Racing, and then, of course, the weekend. Friday is Black Eyed Susan. Saturday's the Preakness Stakes. I know it's both of them are supposed to be a washout, but we'll still be here doing a podcast, throwing it down. We can't wait to hear from you all. Thanks a lot.
On the Switch.